before I got started here. So
we are ready to go. The floor is yours, Jared.
And let me just tell everyone that I inadvertently shared the link for the next session instead of this session. So give me just a second to get the link for this session pulled up, because some of y'all may have gone, why in the world does it say this? And that's not the title of this session. So give me just a moment to get to that link, and I'll post that in the chat for you. But good afternoon. My name is Jared Sloan, and I am with the Kentucky Department of Education, Office of Special Education and Early Learning, or KDEOCL, because we love our acronyms in education, as everybody here knows. So thank you all for taking the opportunity, number one, to be here with me this afternoon. Number two, to learn about special education, because we all know how important that special education is, not only in our regular classroom settings, but particularly in alternative classroom settings, and even more in KECSAC and DJJ facilities. So give me just a moment here to get this link for you all, and let me stop talking for just a second so that I can get that for you. So my apologies. Give me just a second here, and I will do that. I will tell you all, first of all, and this is a little bit of a caveat for this afternoon, that I am the third string where this is concerned. We did have someone else who was scheduled to present. A lot of you are familiar with April Pieper, and unfortunately she is not feeling well, and actually is in the hospital this morning. So appreciate it if you all know her, if you'd send some positive vibes and things out to her. She's been around a lot of these circles for a lot of years. So if you all could just please share, send some positive vibes April's way. So give me just a moment here to get this link for you all, and I will share that with you. So the title of today's presentation is What You Need to Know about Special Education with KECSAC facilities. So SPED and KECSAC facilities, what you need to know. Now, I do have somebody here today who has graciously offered to serve as a backup for me today. So Jessica, if you would just take a moment and introduce yourself, I would appreciate that.
Good morning, all. My name is Jessica Jones, and I work with April in the branch and in DIMR, which is the Division of IDEA Monitoring and Results, and through OCL. And so if you have questions or concerns or thoughts regarding IEPs, I would be the one to be able to hopefully answer those questions and get you that information.
Sure. And Jessica's been very gracious in putting on hold another item that she had today, and setting in here to kind of serve in case that there are some more in-depth questions. But just want to make sure that you all get to take the opportunity and learn about this. So again, my job at the department is to work with physical restraint and seclusion, and a nice nebulous thing known as significant disproportionality. If you have been identified with the district, this means that when districts over-identify students for certain areas of special education based on race, placement, so on and so forth, after 3 years, you're required to take 15% of your federal funds and dedicate it to taking care of that over-identification. So that is quite literally what I call the dime store version. And I'm also part of the DJJ monitoring team. So, and was this past year and have been in years past. So a little bit of experience where this is concerned. So let's just start out here and let's start talking about what is special education and what makes special education unique. Guys, I would ask if you come into the room, if you would please mute yourselves. We've got a lot of back talk here. If you would please mute yourselves at this time, we'd appreciate that. So special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to the parents to meet the very unique needs of children with disabilities, including instruction in the classroom, in the home, in hospitals, and in other settings. Again, special education does not end when a student is outside of the classroom. So whatever setting in which they are entitled to receive education services, they're still entitled to receive special education services. That includes speech language pathology services, travel training, vocational education, among others. And obviously, as you can see on screen there, those are covered in 707 KAR 1002, Section 1, subsection 56. You got to love it when we have our nice little KARs on the screen there. So why is special education important? So the IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, says it's more than important. It is a student's right to receive special education services. Just to give you an idea on some of the trends over the past decade, and these are national trends. In the past decade, the number of students with disabilities has grown from just under 6.5 million, or 13.1% of all students in 2009 to 2010, to almost 7.3 million, or 14.4% of the population in school year 1920. So again, a pretty significant level of your students in any setting, whether that's traditional and even more so in an alternative setting, typically are eligible currently for special education services or have had access to special education services at some point in their academic career. Also, let me just mention here, and we'll touch a little bit more on this in a moment, the impetus or the responsibility for looking for a student who needs these specially designed services does not end when they enter any other type of setting. So an alternative setting, an alternative facility, a DJJ facility. You are still responsible all the way from pre-K up to 12th grade, and again, grade 14, even beyond that, in looking for using child. Guys, I would ask you please to mute yourselves, and we're getting quite a bit of feedback here this morning, so would ask you to mute yourselves, please. The percent of students with disabilities who had a specific learning disability like dyslexia decreased from 37.5% down to 33% in 2019-2020. The percent of students with disabilities with autism, however, almost doubled from 5.8% up to 11%. So again, quite a bit of a jump over that time in terms of autism among our students. Now, we could sit here and have a talk all day long about what may have led to that increase. Any number of factors, and we all know the factors, particularly with students who are in alternative education settings. There's a lot of challenges for these folks, these young men and women, to overcome just to access education, and then obviously more so when they find themselves in an alternative education setting. So, what is FAPE? Free Appropriate Public Education. This is at the core or the center of special education. So an LEA, or a local district, or a contracted entity, shall make, notice this is federal language, shall. If you see shall in federal language, you all know that means you got to do it. A free appropriate public education, FAPE, available to all children with disabilities aged 3 through 21 residing within a district's boundaries who have not received a high school diploma. Again, that's all students regardless of their age between 3 and 21 who have been determined to have a disability, who are enrolled, as it were, in a district, which is all students who have not achieved a high school diploma, including children with disabilities, and there's a reason that that's emboldened for this conversation, who have been suspended or expelled for more than 10 days in a school year. I'm going to repeat that, including those students with disabilities who've been suspended or expelled for more than 10 days in a school year. Actually, it's even more important to make sure that those students receive access to special education services, because they are the ones who typically have missed the most core instruction or specially designed instruction and needed even more as a result. So FAPE shall be provided to each child with a disability, even though the child has not failed or been retained in a course and is advancing from grade to grade based on the child's unique needs and not on the child's disability. So again, it shall be provided even though they've not been failed or retained. In other words, all students have to be able to access a free, appropriate public education, no matter what the setting. And that is a federal law. That's not a Kentucky law. That is a federal law that has been in place for quite a while. So who is entitled to special education? This is kind of what we talked about a moment ago. This is any child age 3 to 21. You have to have a child find system to locate, identify, and evaluate each child that resides in a home, facility, or residence within the district or the area, including children with disabilities who attend private schools, children who are highly mobile, such as migrant children, homeless children, children enrolled in DJJ facilities, who are wards of the state or in state custody, and students who are advancing grade to grade, resulting from passing a grade, but still who may have a disability, who is either in or out of school, and who may need special education and related services. Again, you're always looking for disabilities with students. That responsibility doesn't stop because they're in high school. That responsibility doesn't stop because they're in an alternative setting. And if you hear me hammering home that fact a little bit, there's a reason for that. Child Find, that's having a quality RTI system in place. MTSS, and I know I'm giving you all a bunch of acronyms here. Response to intervention, multi-tiered systems of support. There are not only federal laws that require Child Find, but there are also Kentucky state laws that require RTI systems to be in place anywhere a child attends school, and that includes any alternative setting. So just want to say that that's preschool, elementary, middle, high school, up to age 21 if that student hasn't attained a high school diploma. So back in 2014, the U.S. Department of Education sent out a letter, a Dear Colleague letter, and these pretty much have the ability of law when they're sent out. They sent out a letter specifically to correctional facilities, students with disabilities in correctional facilities, and their parents. And that's what guides most of what we are currently doing in DJJ facilities, KECSAC facilities throughout the state of Kentucky. Again, if you've got that PDF that I shared with you a moment ago, it's got an active link in there. Now, if you want to go have some lively reading, I recommend you do that. But it is important that you're at least familiar with what's in that. It also serves as the basis for what we use in our DJJ monitoring activities throughout the state of Kentucky. So just a piece of information for you there. So in that letter, one of the things that's lined out is the opportunity or the responsibility of shared responsibility. Every agency, and notice all district personnel, that's everyone. If you're contracted, you're considered to be district personnel. So even though you may not be a direct employee of a local district, if you work with kids and there is a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement between your entity and the local district, then by extension, you are considered to be district personnel. Involved in the provision of special education and related services to students in correctional facilities must ensure that free, appropriate public education, even if other agencies share that responsibility. So again, it is everyone's responsibility to make sure that students, special education students, students with disabilities, have access to specially designed instruction, to child find activities, to all of those that are in there. So let's talk about an IEP, or an individualized education program. So what does the law say? An LEA or a district shall ensure, that an IEP is developed and implemented for each child with a disability served by that district, and for each child with a disability placed in or referred to a private school or facility by the LEA. So again, you've got those MOUs and those MOAs that go in place. You are, by extension, an employee of that district. What are you supposed to do? A local district, and you as the extension, shall ensure that the child's IEP is accessible to each regular education teacher. That's all teachers, all of them. Special education teachers, related services providers, and other service providers who are responsible for its implementation. So it has to be accessible. The IEP has to be accessible to every teacher, service provider, so on, that provides services or is a teacher of that child or has some sort of responsibility where that child's concerned. Prior to the implementation of the IEP, each person in that chain is informed of their specific responsibilities related to implementing that IEP, and the most important, the specific accommodations, modifications, and support are provided to the child provided for the child in accordance with the IEP. That IEP is a federal legal binding document. If it's there, if it says it in that IEP, that child has to, by law, receive the services, the time, everything outlined in that IEP. And that's why it's so important that you understand, as implementers, as administrators, and as teachers, and whatever your role may be, you have a responsibility by law to follow that IEP. And we can talk a little bit in a minute about what happens if you don't follow the IEP. That's a different discussion altogether. So what is required as part of that IEP? Now, you all are going, what in the world is that first acronym? It's what was formerly known as present levels, or the PLEP. It's now and I don't even want to say the acronym here because Jessica's going to make fun of me, the PLAAFP. We all still call it the PLEP, but technically it's the PLAAFP, or the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. The transition piece is required. Notice I'm saying these are all required. Consideration of special factors, measurable, that's key, annual goals, specially designed instruction, supplementary aids and services, accommodations, program modifications and support, and finally, the least restrictive environment. And these are specifically important. Some of these are when we're talking about alternative settings for kids. So what is in that present level? The present level is a summary of information and data documenting what the student currently knows and can do. In other words, it's kind of just a summary saying, okay, here's where this child is. It provides the ARC, or the Admissions and Release Committee, with a baseline of student strengths and needs. Make sure you're talking about a student's strengths when you're talking about present levels. A lot of times that's not done. So you need to say, this child has some positive things, not just focusing on their needs, but also saying these are some of the things that this child has that might benefit them. Provide the information on which the IEP is built. It's all built based on these present levels. This is where they are, a status level. And provide the basis for generating measurable annual goals SDI, specifically designed instruction, supports and services to meet individual student needs. So, special factors. What's in the special factors section? This section, a lot of folks just breeze by this and they just pop that checkbox in there and they move right on. This section is not just simply meant to be a checkbox. It should align with the present levels. And let's look at an example here. If a present level is clearly stated an adverse effect in the area of social emotional behavior, the special factors of behavior should be considered. So again, the present levels and the special factors should coincide. They should align with each other. Let's see. Let me see. Let me hang on one second. I think Patty asked a question here. What if a student receives refuses services? Example, a student has a reader and scribe. And Ronnie, we will do that. Let's come back to the end and address those questions. But that's a very good question, Ms. Williams, and I will come back to that. Okay. So again, that present level has clearly stated an adverse effect. It has to coincide with the other. So special factors and behaviors. So if behaviors are discussed in the present levels and they affect the education of the student, this special factor should be marked yes. Notice that there's some keys to things we may have seen in reviews over the past couple of years when looking at special education in facilities. So again, if factors are discussed, and they affect the special education of the student, that special factor should be marked yes. The ARC discussion must then consider strategies, including positive behavior intervention strategies and supports to assist in the development of appropriate behaviors. So if that's an affect, it has to be discussed. PBIS has to be discussed. And I'm not talking about the trademarked PBIS. I'm talking about something to help address the behavior of that student. So examples of PBIS, and we could talk about the trademarked idea as opposed to that, and but proximity, praise, social skills training, and rewarding positive behavior. One thing I will say here, make sure that if you talk about a positive behavior system in your facility, that it's accessible and equitable to all students. That's very important to keep in mind. So in transition, and this is another one of those areas that we've had issues with in looking. In the child's 8th grade, or when the student is 14 years of age, a student of transition services aligned to the student's IEP must be documented in the student's IEP. So when they're in 8th grade or 14 years. At age 16, that IEP has to also include appropriate, measurable post-secondary goals. Don't just gloss over that section. If you're the person writing that IEP, or if you're in that process for reviewing as part of the ARC, it has to include those there. A complete course of study, including specific courses, not electives. Don't just say electives. They have to be specific courses that those students take part in, which are needed to assist the student in reaching that post-secondary goal. So again, it needs to be as specific as possible to allowing the student to complete that post-secondary goal. So let's look here. We talked about measurable annual goals. And when you talk about those, there's a good little acronym here, A, B, C, D, E, F. Those are the pieces of the measurable annual goals as you write them. And we're going to actually walk through one here together in just a moment. So measurable annual goals are statements of anticipated results determined by the ARC. They're to meet the needs of of the student in supporting progress and advancement in the general education curriculum. So when you talk about audience, You have to state the student's the name. Behavior. What can you observe? See, hear, count the action the student will perform. Circumstance. Describe the instructional materials or circumstances used to teach and measure that stated behavior. Degree or criteria. How well must the student perform this skill? Evaluation or method of measurement. How will the implementer measure student progress? How will progress be monitored? And determine the tool or resource or assessment that needs to be used to determine that student's progressing. And finally, the frequency of the data collection. On what basis will the data be collected? What I would say to you is make sure it's not annually. Progress monitoring needs to be as quick as appropriate. So weekly, bi-weekly, twice a month, so on and so forth. You don't want to set those parameters too far apart there. It needs to be something measurable that you can adapt instruction if it needs to be adapted over time. So let's take a look at one here. And which one of these goals would you say is measurable? So what I'm going to ask you to do just over in the chat, if you think that 1 is measurable, put 1. If you think that 2 is measurable, put 2. So I'll give you just a minute to complete this. So obviously the consensus is that 2 is the one that's measurable. I will tell you that more oftentimes than not, 1 is the one that we see when we look at a lot of IEPs. So again, you've just got to make sure that it has all of those elements. So obviously the answer is 2, and that's the one that's measurable. I'm sorry, is there a question? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard someone with a question. So let's take a look at these. So let's look at it piece by piece. So let me go back here. So A for audience. So remember, name the child. When presented with a non-preferred activity and 3 verbal prompts, what's the child's name? Her name is Judy Hamilton, okay? Okay, well, that's interesting. In this case, it's Jill, not Judy Hamilton. But as you all can see here, folks, do me a favor. Each one of these goals should be specific to the student. Please don't copy and paste. Please don't go to another kid's IEP and copy this goal and paste it into the next one. I can't tell you how many times that we've been doing a file review and I've seen a goal and it's like it might have this on the screen and the child's name might be Jill. That might say Jack or it might say Jared, and it's not even coinciding with the child. Obviously, that tells someone that you're copying and pasting that and you're not really looking at. You can obviously use other things as templates. That's okay. But make sure that you're writing something that's specific to each child and you're not painting every single child with the same brush. So let's look at our behavior. Well, my thing's kind of going crazy here on me. Well, I don't know what happened to those slides. Don't you love it? Oh, it's doing as I go backwards, so my apologies. Let's look here at behavior. So when presented with a non-preferred activity and 3 verbal prompts, Jill will begin working on the activity. So what's the behavior specific that you're looking for? So that's the measurable activity. You're going to have something to track that progress monitoring. You're going to have something to record that they'll begin working on the activity. So again, you have to have something to record that. Well, I'm going to have to do these backwards. When presented with a non-preferred activity and 3 verbal prompts, remember what I said earlier. If it's here, it has to be followed, and it has to be followed the whole way down the line. So if you make this a goal for a child, and you're a service provider, you're a teacher for that kid, and you tell them once and they don't do it, and you use discipline action with them as a result of telling them once, then you're not following the IEP. So you need to make sure that if this goal is there and you've got a child in your classroom, that you're doing what the IEP specifically says. So again, when presented with a non-preferred activity, in other words, something you don't want to do, and we know that happens, and 3 verbal prompts, you want to make sure that you get to work on that, Jill. Jill, I know that this is something that's particularly difficult for you. We're here to support you. We're here to help you. You need to make sure that you're getting to the work here. No, I don't want to do that. Yeah, I mean, you all heard it. It's just a reality of everything. The 3 verbal prompts, if that's what this goal says, it has to be what you give the child the opportunity to do. The degree and criteria, when within 5 minutes on 4 consecutive occasions. So again, you need to track it, but you have to give, Jill, within 5 minutes on 4 consecutive occasions. That's how you give the credit for Jill completing the activity. The degree or criteria. So let's see, I've already got that. The evaluation of measurement through latency recording. That's the way that you're monitoring and you're measuring. Folks, if you could please mute yourself unless you've got a question. Appreciate that. So again, how are you recording that? What's the measurement, the instrument that you're using to measure? And finally, what's the frequency of the collection as measured weekly? Again, as measured annually is not going to work. As measured every 3 months, that's probably a little too far out. So you want to make sure that it's something that you can do on a consistent basis. I'm not saying you have to do it every minute of every hour of every day, and we would never say that. But what I am saying to you is it has to have a reasonable frequency of data collection in there. Any questions about that? All right, so let's move on here. Oh, thanks, Tim. I appreciate the comment there. Let's be somebody still alive out there. What is specially designed instruction? SDI is the adaptation of content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of each child with a disability and to ensure access that the child has to the general curriculum included in the program of studies. Again, every child has to have equitable access, the same as no matter if they're a student with disabilities or students who does not have has not been identified with disabilities. They have to have the adaptation if they found to have a need, the adaptation of content, methodology, or delivery, and it has to be done as spelled out in the IEP. So again, and that's the responsibility of everyone down the line, the administrator to make sure it's done, the teacher to make sure it's done. If you're responsible, please make sure that you're following that. Again, this is a state reg, so you got to make sure that that SDI, that they have the access to that adaptation of content, methodology, or delivery. So simply put, what is SDI? It's what the teacher does to instruct, assess, and reteach. Notice that doesn't say or. It's and reteach the student. So again, how can that student, what can you do to change the way that content's being taught, the way that content's being tested, or to make sure that kid gets it? How do you know when the kid gets it and making sure that that kid gets it, for lack of a better term. You've got to make sure and that 100% that that child is getting access to that curriculum the same way that any other kid would in that setting. Doesn't matter. So let me just make an aside here very quickly. If you're using computer-based instruction and that child's not getting it, and they've got something in the IEP that says that they require reteaching, that means they've got to have the reteaching. And that means that you've got to have a qualified instructor offer that reteaching. So if you're using CBI and it's not working, they've still got to get access to that instruction. So there has to be supplemental instruction that takes place to reteach that content. So let's look at some examples of what SDI or services are. So again, SDI is the means, the vehicle to ensure the students receive their high quality instruction and services that will result in progress towards academic and functional standards, graduation, and meaningful post-secondary outcomes. So SDI, specially designed instruction, should be delivered by the special education teacher. Now, does that mean there's not a responsibility of access to the tier 1 materials or the regular classroom materials by the classroom teacher? That's not what that's saying. They're saying this is who's supposed to offer an additional layer of support to the student. So examples of SDI include direct instruction, guided practice, scaffolding of instruction, and finally, multisensory teaching strategies. Again, these are not all inclusive. These are just examples of SDI. You got to make sure the kid gets the content and understands the content. So let's look at this SDI annual goal. When presented with the non-preferred activity, Jill will begin working within 5 minutes, 4 consecutive occasions, as measured by weekly latency recording. Y'all remember that's our annual goal. So let's look at supplementary aids and services now. So these are aid services and other items, other supports that are provided in general education classes or education-related settings to make sure enable a child with disabilities to be educated with non-disabled children to the maximum extent appropriate. So again, it's making sure they have access to everything they need to get an equitable education. So what are supplementary aids and services? So again, simply put, SAS is what the student needs to advance towards the IEP goal and make progress in the general curriculum. So again, we're going to go back and look at this again. I want you all to think for just a second, if you would, please comment in the chat. If this was your annual measurable goal, what are some of the things that you think Jill might need to help her attain or get or meet this goal? So what are some supplementary items that she might get or might need to attain this goal? So go ahead and put that over in the chat if you would. Extra time. That's a good one. What else? Anything else? Can you think of anything that Jill might need? Come on now, somebody's got to have something. Thank you, Jessica. Visual prompts or cues. Positive reinforcements. Very good. A sensory diet, a timer, any number of things that can provide extra support means for her to be able to meet this goal. Again, we want to make sure that the kids meet the goal. We don't want to set it, number one, as an unreasonable goal. Positive feedback. Very good, Kathy. So there's several different ways that you can do that and make sure that they understand or that they access or have the support that they need supplementally to access and be successful at the goal. So what are, let's talk about program modifications and supports for school personnel. So what are some examples of modifications and support to be successful in the general education curriculum? We've got to advance towards attaining the annual measurable goals, participate in extracurricular or non-academic activities, and be educated with other students with or without disabilities. So think of collaboration between special education and a related service provider to gain understanding of the things in the student's IEP. Learning strategies used by other folks who work with the student to help them be successful. Adult support across all settings, whether that's self-care activity or what have you, and maybe private or unsupervised environments for addressing individual health needs. So again, whatever needs to be changed or extra supports to give the kid an opportunity to be successful. This is a biggie, least restrictive environment, or LRE. And again, we're going to go back to the law here for just a minute. So an LEA, a district, and by extension, whatever organization or setting they find themselves in, shall, again, ensure to the maximum extent appropriate students with disabilities, including those enrolled in public or private institutions or other facilities, are educated with non-disabled peers. Yes, Kathy, and I can repost that link here in just a minute. I've actually put it over in the PowerPoint, but I put it in the chat, but I can repost it here in just a minute. So even at alternative schools and correctional facilities, a continuum of educational placements should be discussed at least annually and based on the student's needs. So a student in an alternative school or correctional facility may not be able to participate in the regular classroom with supplementary aids and services. So the ARC would need to discuss part-time in a resource room with other special education students and a special education teacher, or full-time in a special education class with other students and a certified special education teachers. This decision cannot be made based on perceived funding or administrative convenience. In other words, there's not enough teachers to teach. We don't have enough teachers assigned to this facility to do that. You can't use that as an excuse. When it comes to special education, these kids, as we've talked about, a free, appropriate public education. FAPE. Whatever that child needs is what they have to receive. It can't be limited on the size of the facility. That barrier has to be removed. You cannot use that as an excuse not to offer the kid what they need to be successful. And I'm saying that verbatim. So somebody tells you, well, we don't have enough staff to put out there to take care of this. That's not an excuse. That barrier has to be removed. If that's what's best for that kid, that's what they get. If you've got two teachers and one of the teachers is your math and science teachers and the other one is the English and social studies, and you all have got kids all day long, and one of them's a special education / English and social studies teacher, and that child needs a resource room or that's what they need to be successful, you got to have that full-time teacher for a resource room for that kid. So you can't use that as an excuse. LRE, a continuum of educational placements are required at every facility. regular class, special class, resource or self-contained, special schools, home instruction, and instruction in hospitals and institutions. So again, that full continuum of options has to be available to every single child, regardless of physically where they are. So if they're in a facility and they're incarcerated in a facility, they still have to have the access to the same supports that any other kid in the district would have. Placement decisions should be determined at least annually and based on the needs documented in the IEP. Again, not administrative convenience. You do what's best for the kid. So let's talk about related services here. Related services include transportation, developmental, corrective, or supportive services as required to assist a child to benefit from special education. Those are speech language, audiology services, interpreting, psychological or counseling, PT and OT, physical and occupational therapy, early identification and assessment of disabilities, including rehab, orientation and mobility services, and medical services for diagnostic or evaluative purposes. Related services also means school health services and school nurse services, social work services in school, and parent counseling and training. Related services do not mean a medical device that's surgically implanted, the optimization of that device's functioning, maintenance of that device, or replacement of that device. Again, it is the school's responsibility that every child has access to related services as that child needs it. So let's talk about reentry. And this is one of our last things we're going to be talking about here, and then we'll leave some time for questions. And I'll go back and make sure to address the ones we've had. Students enrolled in an alternative school or DJJ facility are significantly more likely to experience successful reentry if the appropriate programs and supports are in place and discussed with the students prior to transition to the comprehensive school or community. So you got to make sure that you're planning for successful transition back out into the school or community. That's part of this. Reentry planning is critical. And you all know exit, when they're getting ready to go back out of a facility, possibly where they've been incarcerated even, it is very, very important to make sure that there's a plan and that they know what supports are available to them once they exit. You have to prepare that ARC meeting in appropriate amount of time, 4 to 6 weeks prior to that transition. You don't just come up on Tuesday and know that they're going to be released on Wednesday and make that ARC meeting happen. You've got to plan it with enough time, notification if you can, to make sure that you do that. So you've got to still follow the regulations that are there in terms of notification to parents, guardians, so on. So what resources are out there that are available to you all as KECSAC facilities, as teachers, as administrators, as what have you? We obviously here inside the department have the Division of IDEA monitoring results, the implementation in preschool, and you can call us at any time. And I'm going to tell you something, folks, we're here to help. It's not actually here to help, and I would hope you understand. We're here to answer any questions that you have. We actually want to help you. We want to make sure that the right thing is being done for kids. Only if we absolutely by law have to do we have to come in and take actions. If it's something that's reportable, we have to do it. I hope you all understand. We don't have an option where that's concerned. But if you've got a question and you're really not sure which way to turn or what to do, that's why we're here. We're really here to help, and that's I think the thing that a lot of folks misunderstand. We've also got some guidance documents out there that are really important. The IEP guidance document, the compliance record review, where you can go in and you can look at your own files and you can say, and it's the same thing we use when we come into your facilities to look at your IEP records. So again, it's very important to know if you find out that we're coming or that we have been in your district for a review, it's important to do that. It's important to review your records anyway. And obviously all of you all have access to local directors of special education. There's the monitoring manual that we have, and finally the wonderful nighttime reading of Kentucky Administrative Regulations, because we all have a lot of time to sit around and read those. But the good thing about some of these other documents is it really puts those in a pretty simple and easier to access time to or form to access. The other thing that you all may not necessarily be aware of is that each of you all has access to a local special educational cooperative, and those are located all across the state. And by the way, if you don't, after today, if you don't get a chance to download what I shared with you, you can go onto our KDE website and say KDE Special Education Cooperatives on Google, and it'll give you a full list of where these are and who to contact. So again, each of you all has access to these folks on a more regional basis to help you really kind of navigate this. Your directors of special ed first, obviously, in your local district, then your special education cooperatives. We also have a group that helps advise us. There's the State Advisory Council for Exceptional Children, or SACEC, and that's 21 voting members appointed by the governor, either current or former, the majority of whom shall be persons with disabilities or parents of children age birth to 26, and membership includes membership from DOC and DJJ. So that's important. Another piece to note is that each November, obviously saving last year, we have there's an annual institute conducted by the Council for Exceptional Children in Louisville at the Galt House, the 21st through 23rd of November this year, the CEC conference, Kentucky CEC. You've got the Behavior Institute that happens biannually. That's also part of your resources, and that gives you a better idea of what's out there. Now, let's go to time for questions. And Jessica, I'm actually going to bring you on here if you could, and I want to go back and if you don't care, I want to ask you to address Patty's question, or Ms. Williams' question from earlier. What if a student refuses services? Example, a student has a reader or scribe. Student refuses to let someone read for him and refuses a text reader. So
you need to try as much as anything to use those resources that he has. Document if they refuse to do those services, definitely document that. And if after you keep trying and you do this for a couple of days and the student continues to refuse, then an ARC needs to be called so that you can readdress ways to assist that student in order to have them be successful. They may want like a peer reader. Maybe you could think about a peer. I know you got text, and that kind of makes them look like different, because I use different resources. And if you have an adult sitting there, that kind of points them out too. But if there's a peer that they interact really well with and they work well together, and the peer is willing to assist this student, then you might try a peer buddy and a peer reader. But definitely need to, after documentation, come back as an ARC and discuss other options and ways to be able to help the student.
Okay, Ms. Williams, did that answer your question? Or I hope it did.
Yes.
Okay, good deal. And I don't know why I'm getting folks who are having trouble accessing, but I'm going in and clicking access right now. So if anybody else would like to access to that, I just put it in the chat. So anybody do that. Anybody else have any other questions?
Jared, if I can, I'll ask a question
Sure.
that someone sent me just a private message, I guess. And so in talking about transition, particularly into our programs and out of our programs, I think you were very clear in there that there has to be ARC meetings that are called for transitioning in. There should be a plan 4 to 6 weeks prior to transitioning out.
If you can.
Obviously, this creates some challenges for our programs when we think about who has responsibility for placement. In our facilities, that is typically not the school district who has responsibility for placement. They are in DJJ facilities, for example, there's a judge in the court system through the administrative office of the courts that places kids and then also releases kids. And so we have situations where we show up to school on Tuesday and Johnny, who was here yesterday, is now gone because Johnny had a court date at 4 o'clock yesterday. And in that court date, the judge or whoever moved that child somewhere else without any real notification to the district. To the school district, at least. So how do we work in those situations, and what flexibility do you have in working with us in that?
And Jessica, I'm happy to answer it, or if you want to answer it, either way. So here's the thing. We totally understand, and that's a good question. Notice that I threw in there, even as Ronnie said his questions, if possible. We know that there is we will do everything we can to try to do that. If you know, as best as possible, if you can convene that ARC, then it needs to be done. Now, we know that it takes time to convene an ARC. So, Jessica, do you have anything you wanted to add to that? So, again, like you said, in a pie-in-the-sky situation, that works. But we also understand that, so don't misunderstand that we're sitting here going, well, that has to be done it's supposed to be. That's the best we can say. And we will, obviously we will do our best to say, give the benefit of the doubt, I guess is the best way to put that there. And so we try to give benefit of the doubt. I know sometimes folks don't think that, but I can't tell you how many times that Jessica or April or Irma and I have quite literally said, oh gosh, is there any way we can figure out a way that we can help them out here, or that we can give some leeway in terms of this file or this child? So we really do try to give that. I know it doesn't necessarily seem like that sometimes, but we really do.
And I think that's good to know. I think when we look at our programs, our teachers and administrators, I think, have the very best intention for our kids and are in this for the right reason. But there are lots of times that there are outside influences that impact their decision and ability to do certain things. And so we just want to always be aware of those as we're working to do the very best we can. So thank you for that response.
Yeah. Well, and I want folks to know too that we at the department do our very level best, and I hope that this comes off. And we try to do everything we can to support districts. Here, and I'll just be perfectly frank, we've all been teachers, we've all been principals, we've all had other things, and we know that there are some times that there are things beyond your control. And in those instances, if there is a means for you to provide an explanation, in whatever way that might be, it is always better to have some explanation, if it's possible, than no explanation. So if you don't document it, it doesn't happen.
I think that's the important thing, Jared, is documentation. Yep. And to all of the folks who are listening to this, that we understand, I think that KDE understands there are situations that happen. Documentation is your friend. And without that, there is no evidence to say that anything happened. And so if we take anything away from this, besides all of the great information, it is that documentation is absolutely essential, no matter what's taking place in the program.
Sure, absolutely. So, any other questions? All righty, folks. Again, Irma White is your DJJ contact. I do a lot of assistance. It's kind of one of those other duties as assigned situations where we reach out. Jessica has been a part of that monitoring team. April is the branch manager. April Pieper is the branch manager there. And you know, obviously, you can reach out to any of us. You can email us. You can call us. You can send up a smoke signal. You know, I'm in Versailles, so I may not see it very well. But just make sure if you have a question, please feel free to reach out and ask. That's why we're here.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate this session. I appreciate you being here with us. Also, to everybody who's here, we have another session with these folks coming up at 1 o'clock. So feel free to join that. It'll get into a little more detail about site-specific visits and kind of some trends that are emerging within KECSAC programs across the state. So I think it's something you'd really enjoy. We appreciate you all being here. We hope you have a great quick lunch, and we will see you back at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Central. Thanks, guys. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.